before we get started, we'd like to take a moment to hear from our distinguished sponsors, the Biotechnology Innovation Organization and Bayer.
We are facing an environmental planetary crisis, and innovation is our greatest hope. Join us in advancing policy that fosters the innovation we need to meet today's global challenges. Work with government officials, industry leaders, and experts who are championing bio-based sustainable alternatives. Discuss key innovations and challenges facing the industry, and network with leaders around climate and sustainability action, food security, and growing our bioeconomy. At Bio, we are committed to supporting bio-based breakthroughs at all stages of development by developers of all types and sizes. Join us in the journey toward a bio-based tomorrow.
Fueled by hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising, the litigation industry is suing Roundup, the most widely tested and trusted herbicide in the world. The litigation industry says Roundup isn't safe, and they try to keep juries from hearing the whole story by preventing scientific analysis that demonstrates the safety of Roundup from being shown. Why should you care? Because if the litigation efforts continue, it would mean smaller harvests here and higher prices here. Learn how the Roundup lawsuits impact you.
All right, so our next panel will tackle clean fuels tax incentives. Our panelists include Anthony Reed, a partner at FGS Global, Jane Franch, the Senior Director of Climate Impact at Pivot Bio, Grant Zimmerman, CEO and Director of AMP Americas, and Mitchell Hora, CEO of Continuum Ag. Thank you all so much for being here. So we'll start off with a discussion with our panelists, followed by some time to answer questions from you all. Please feel free to submit your questions via Slido during the discussion. And yeah, just to kind of start with a little state of play of what we're talking about here. Early this year, the Biden administration Treasury Department released long-awaited notice of intent of proposed guidance on the 45Z tax credit for clean fuel producers. This was born out of the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act and replaced some existing tax credits for biofuels and sustainable aviation fuel. For farmers, USDA also published proposed guidance on how to calculate emissions from agricultural feedstocks, along with the draft feedstock calculator, which we'll be talking about as well. While 45Z is already in effect, a lot of this is still in the proposed stage, and we're waiting to see exactly how Congress and the new Trump administration handle these. And I know everyone here has a lot of thoughts about how this process has kind of played out and what guidance we have so far. So just to kind of get us started, we'll go down the line, and Jane, we'll start with you. If you can kind of talk about how this guidance affects your industry.
Thank you. So I'm Jane Frank. I'm with Pivot Bio, and for those of you who aren't familiar with us, we are the only proven biological nitrogen product built by and for American farmers. And so with 45Z and the Climate Smart Agriculture Rule, we see this as a great opportunity to link policy with practices that farmers are interested in. They're motivated to take some risks on their farm. They want new tools for conservation on their farm, and we have a tremendous opportunity here to link the Climate Smart Ag Rule or interim rule with 45Z to create those new market opportunities and new revenue streams for growers. And if it's done well, this can also open the door for all kinds of American innovation, including from the biotech sector, products like Pivot Bio and others that can give farmers even more tools to reduce their inputs while maintaining and even increasing their productivity, which is something that American farmers know how to do really well and have demonstrated that they can do again and again and again. And not only does this support the farm economy and provide new revenue streams for growers, this is also reducing American farmers' input or reliance on foreign inputs, as well as supporting market opportunities abroad.
Great. Right. And Mitchell, we'll kick it down to you if you want to talk a little bit about what came out of this guidance and what works and what you want to see improved.
Yeah. No, thanks for the question, and thanks for having me. I gotta have everyone, if we can, though, humor me real fast. Who knows what 45Z is? Show of hands. Okay, good. I sat right here 2 years ago and asked that question, and in this room of esteemed people that really are on top of it, 9 hands went up when I asked that 2 years ago. And so I'm really excited that now it is front and center, part of the topic here. When I was here 2 years ago, I was talking about it as a farmer, right? And I farm in southeast Iowa, and my family's been using no-till since 1978, using cover crops since 2013, and deep into this, regenerative space for a long time. So when I saw 45Z, it was just the light bulb moment for me that here's a real opportunity to reward farmers for their holistic story, and of course reward biofuel production, and really enable that collaboration. From our quick view on the rules, of course the USDA public comment period ends tomorrow. We submitted our rules, we submitted our comments, and we're advocating for book and claim to be used, advocating to get rid of the USDA feedstock calculator and just use the GREET feedstock calculator that's already there and much more holistic. And then a little bit of modification on the MRV or the audit protocols. And that's really what Continuum Ag does. We're a software company. We've scored over 350 million bushels of U.S. crops, getting farmers ready and aware for 45Z, and just helping farmers to manage their data. That's really what this is all going to take, is better data to tell our story, pass through audit protocols, and utilize this story that farmers have. Just package it together, put a number on it, advocate for farmers, and advocate for biofuels.
That's great. And Grant, we'll turn to you. You're a bit unique here, that it's not just 45Z that y'all are really watching. Wondering if you can also talk about, how 45Z and other clean fuel incentives really impact RNG and dairy farmers.
Yeah, thank you. So I really identify with Mitchell's question because I've spent most of the last 10 years sitting in rooms with people who don't know yet what I'm talking about. So it's really gratifying that some of this conversation has come to the forefront. So AMP Americas makes dairy renewable natural gas. We partner with dairy farmers, and U.S. dairy farmers are already the most productive dairy farmers in the world. The least waste product, the greatest production per animal, the most affordable source of dairy nutrition anywhere in the world. And we partner with them to be even better. And so since 2011, we've been working with dairy farmers to collect methane emissions from waste and use that methane just the same way we would use natural gas. And California has a program. We also make RINs. And so most of our gas has gone to transportation fuel for a while because we're far cleaner than diesel when you talk about tailpipe emissions, things like that. And we are excited about the 45Z because it is another opportunity to help more and more farmers do what they already want to do. We work with very large farms, and the technology and business processes have gotten better so that we've started to work with smaller farms. And the Z would help us bring that impact, bring the collection of this waste product, turn it into valuable source of American energy, would help us drive that impact to smaller and smaller dairy farms. We're also excited about the V because anything that you can do with natural gas, with geologic natural gas, you can do with renewable natural gas. And so we're excited to make fertilizer, right? Almost all of the hydrogen in the world is made from reforming natural gas, and using dairy renewable natural gas to make clean hydrogen just makes so much more sense than using expensive electricity that's short because data center demand, et cetera, et cetera. Why not use the solution we've already got? And so that's our mission, is to find more ways to use this waste product that we're helping farmers collect and turn it into value for them and for the rest of our economy.
That's Great. And quickly, Jane, going back to you, if you could talk a little bit about some of the climate smart practices that are included in this updated guidance. And I know that there was some unbundling that happened there, but wondering if you think that kind of advanced enough.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the unbundling is great. We're very much in support of the unbundling, and there's 5 practices that are included now. So there is no-till. There's actually 2 practices within tillage. And there is cover cropping. So those are kind of 2 of the practices. And then there's 3 nitrogen practices. One is nitrification inhibitors, and then there is spring only, 2 timing practices, spring only or split in season. In general, I think the unbundling of the practices is really positive and is a step in the right direction. We need to give farmers more tools, and we need to give them the flexibility to choose the tools that are appropriate to their land and to the context that they're farming in. So we do really think that unbundling is positive. We would like to see even more flexibility on the practices that are available to growers, because Pivot Bio is one example of technology, and really we're just at the front of the curve of this wave of new technology that's coming forward for growers. So what we can do is we can replace a portion of that synthetic nitrogen. We can sit alongside that synthetic nitrogen. We can make it more efficient, the synthetic nitrogen that the farmers are already using, and then we can also reduce the inputs by replacing some of that with a biological nitrogen that increases the resilience of that plant and the nutrient use efficiency on that acre. And so we'd really like to see those practices expanded even further. For example, can we look at a nitrogen rate practice that would be, in a tech-neutral way, would open the door to a whole range of different practices that really address the nitrogen inputs side of this equation, and would open the door for many different technologies to sit alongside with the farmer, give them the tools that they need to experiment, try new things, and support not only American innovation, but also the outcomes they're looking for on their farm, which is reducing input costs, higher productivity, and also their conservation goals, taking care of their soil and land stewardship.
Great. A lot of what we've discussed is kind of in flux right now with the current political landscape and change of administration. Anthony, I'm wondering if you could kind of walk us through what we should expect to see in Congress during this reconciliation process as we're kind of updating tax code and policy.
Yeah, so obviously that's kind of the thing of the day is what happens with 45Z. Does it get extended? Does it get modified? Does Congress look at other things? And obviously it's all kind of right now through the lens of what is available from a cost perspective and what is able to be done. As you said, we had kind of an interim rule that people are counting on, and I think people are starting to monetize the credit, even though it is listed as kind of an interim guidance. It is the only thing people have to rely on. So I think people see there is enough to actually start moving forward and claiming the credit. But there are still a lot of unanswered questions and things like that people would like to see. And Jane and Mitchell talked about the CSA piece of this. Are there other ways through the legislative process people want to maybe look at modifications to requiring CSA to be connected to it? There's interest in obviously the foreign feedstock, foreign fuel issue around 45Z. Is there more clarity that can be done around the modeling that was done? So I think there's a lot of interest in there, but it all is going to be funneled through the lens of what is the art of the possible from a cost perspective. I think there's a ton of support for the credit. I think we've all seen that. Lots of members of Congress across the spectrum have kind of stood up and said, this is a really important thing for their farmers, for the rural economy. And so I don't see 45Z going away. The question in my mind is, are there changes that could happen through the legislative side? Could it be extended? And I think that's, you guys are watching it in the headlines like we are every day. How much money are they going to have available? What things are they going to be able to do? And then in parallel, the question is going to be, what is the administration interested in doing in this from a guidance perspective? Is it something that Treasury is going to take up the pen on? Is USDA going to take up the pen on the CSA piece? That's something that's going to be of a lot of interest to a lot of folks here. And it's a little bit of the chicken and the egg. Are the regulators going to wait to see what happens with Congress? How long is that process going to take? And how much more certainty does the industry need? Because I know there are some who think there isn't enough. There are some who think that there is, and I think people are in different spaces depending on the sector that you're in.
And I know that we're still pretty early into this administration, but wonder if you can talk through, what we've seen so far from the second Trump administration, how that might compare to the first one in terms of biofuel policy and support.
Yeah, I think it's a much better position that the industry is in, given where we were in the early years of Trump 1, right? Where we, with the RFS in particular, a lot of SREs, it took a while to educate and get people to kind of understand the impact of these policies on agriculture, on farmers, given all the trade uncertainty back then. And we ended up in a really good place at the end of the Trump administration. It was a good RFS rule at the end. They had adjudicated the waivers under the program. And so you fast forward into this administration, you have 2 executive orders on unleashing American energy and energy dominance. Both of them reference biofuels alongside traditional oil and gas type of products. So that was signal number 1 that came out. You have a really good working relationship that we've seen between Lee Zeldin at EPA and Brooke Rollins at USDA, and a lot of attention being paid to biofuels. You saw some recent decisions about ethanol and the E15 issue with some of the states. So there's been really strong signals out of this administration early on that they want to take care of the farmer, they understand biofuels as part of the equation, and they've really stepped up so far. Now there's a lot of decisions that are going to have to be made, but we're starting off at a pretty good place, I think.
Gotcha. And kind of one of the questions that just came up from the audience is, how the Trump administration might handle 45V. Anthony and Grant, I'll kind of kick that to you all.
Yeah, so I said I was excited about the Z and the V, and I should qualify that. I'm excited about the potential because if Treasury uses the scoring system that the Department of Energy set up using something called the GREET model that they've been working on for 30 years, that's backed by empirical data, by thousands of users who give inputs, that tells the truth about how clean a fuel is, then dairy RNG would score very favorably in all of these programs, and it would very much incentivize us to capture methane from waste at every dairy in the country. And the thing that I'm optimistic about is energy realism and the fact that we need so many different solutions going forward, not just for any particular agenda, but we need energy to support our society, our quality of life, to support sustainable nutrition, growing and provision to the country. And the reason that hydrogen is so important is because it is the way that we make synthetic fertilizer, and that's how we're able to be as productive as we are in providing food for the world. And so I would like to see the 45V incentivize actual clean hydrogen production by allowing producers of technology that works, that's at scale, that's efficient today, use a combination of geologic natural gas and renewable natural gas to make clean hydrogen, cleaner than electricity-driven hydrogen. And so that's my optimism here, is that if we can allow producers to account for the feedstocks they actually use, give the right score to dairy RNG and to other feedstocks that might go into hydrogen production, allow book and claim, then we could be the world leader in clean hydrogen production.
Yeah, and I think to your point, Grant, this is why I think it's a great sell to the administration, right? It's U.S. energy, it's from rural areas. There's tons of opportunity, billions of dollars that are interested in deploying behind this credit. And so I do think that it fits right in line with the policy goals of the administration and the Congress. And you've seen, hundreds of groups out there advocating for V for that reason. Like, there's just a ton of capital that could be brought to bear if this credit continues.
Gotcha. And kind of pivoting to another question from the audience, and as a reminder to submit any questions that you have via the Slido. The question is, do you think that the transition to EVs is a threat to the biofuel, clean fuel business, and how to navigate that?
So I do not. I think there's room for all, and I don't think it's a threat. I think it is important that technologies be measured equally across the board. And that has been, I think, the biggest frustration from the biofuels community when it comes to electrification and EVs, right? It's the putting the thumb on the scale to advantage electrification, whether it's specific rules on the emission standards that everyone has been talking about. It doesn't have a pathway for liquid fuels to be part of that. But if you actually measure it on a well-to-wheels basis, electrification versus biofuels competes very, very well. I mean, RNG, is a carbon negative fuel. You have if you did plug-in hybrids with biofuels, actually score way better than electric vehicles do. But things like indirect land use change, which has been a topic that we've been battling for 15 years, penalizing farmers for what happens in Brazil and other places. These are penalties and policy levers that the industry has had to overcome that, again, like electrification does not. There's no penalty for mining critical minerals for vehicles like the farmer has to deal with on biofuel policy. So yeah, I think if you level the playing field, it has real great opportunity for us. And biofuels can feed all these different sectors. You can't electrify planes. Sustainable aviation fuel is a great market opportunity that you're not going to be able to do it. Heavy duty vehicles, you're not going to be able to electrify. So I think there's room for both, but the playing field has to be level.
I'll add on, there's some crazy stuff going on with electric vehicles and electric vehicle dealerships right now, so we got to sort through that, but that's a different topic. But what I talk about with farmers in this is monitoring the sustainable aviation fuel piece. Sustainable aviation fuel is also incentivized under 45Z, and you can use ethanol for sustainable aviation fuel with the alcohol to jet pathway. And currently in the U.S., we produce about 17 billion gallons of ethanol. It takes about 1.7 gallons of ethanol to produce a gallon of sustainable aviation fuel. The goal for sustainable aviation fuel is to be at 35 billion gallons by 2050. So even if we took 100% of the ethanol, turned all of it into sustainable aviation fuel, that'd only be 10 billion gallons of SAF. Huge additional market opportunity there. That's where winter oilseed crops or just other opportunities fit in on that. But no, I think huge opportunity for these biofuels to be there for the long haul, looking at the SAF piece.
And can I just add a point here? And sorry if you guys have heard this before, in an energy crowd, this is a 2-year ago joke. Does anybody know what energy source in the entire world, what energy source we've actually transitioned away from? Whale oil. Does anybody know, do we burn more or less wood today than we did 100 years ago? More. That's right. So energy transition is sort of a misnomer. We need all sources of energy. We're using more of just about every source of energy that we've ever used than we ever did in the past. And so it's not about moving away from things, it's about adding, and biofuels is additive. Renewable natural gas is additive. We need to add these things because we need more and more energy as the world is driving to be more sustainable, cleaner. Absolutely, we should do everything we can that makes sense to clean up our energy usage, but we're not going to move away from or we're not going to get rid of energy sources. We need to continue to add them because the things that we're doing today require more and more energy. And in order to continue growing and sustaining the lifestyle that we've come to expect here, lifting people globally out of poverty, we need energy, we need ag in order to do that. And without those two, the rest of the UN Sustainable Development Goals are meaningless.
And kind of going off that, and looking at one of our audience questions here, asking are we wasting time with 45Z? I know that there's recently been, push to reinstate some of the old biofuel tax credits like 40A and 40B. I'm kind of curious what you all see as the way forward here, especially in face of other issues the biofuel industry is facing, like RFS and E15.
No, I don't think it's dead. I think it's here at least through 27, and then we'll see what happens from an extension. Like I said, there's been, they had Ways and Means Day not too long ago where members get to come in and talk about their tax priorities. You guys have seen all the letters. I mean, the House has a 3-vote majority. Well, one will be 3, and anyone can kind of stop the train. The Midwest Republicans stood up when they tried to repeal 45Z during the debt ceiling discussions 2 years ago, and they said, heck no, we're not voting for this, and they laid down on the tracks and said, we're standing in line for 45Z. So 45Z is here. Those members are going to defend that credit. As I said before, my money is on, it's not, is it going away? Is it, well, could there be changes on the sides, and could there be an extension of it? I think the discussion around the legacy credits is everything we've heard is that the committees have no interest in reviving legacy credits, and that's across the board. That's not 48, it's 40B, it's the ITC, other things. They want to funnel it through the existing credits. So that's 45Z, that's 48E, that's the other credits. So are there opportunities to modify these to address some of the issues that people are concerned about that are trying to bring back some of the legacy credits? I think that's possible. But the other limiting factor is cost. I'll use 40A as an example. It's $6 billion to bring that back, and you're not going to get rid of 45Z and add on another huge credit for a year. So how do you fit all these priorities? It's really about prioritization and how do you get it? How do you do all these things in the context of the money they have to spend? And I think that's the real significant challenge. So they're not going to be looking to add things on. And that's why I think extension itself would be really hard. It's going to be, what do they have to deal with in the existing paradigm? And then how do some changes maybe happen along the side? But I just do not see the bringing back of the legacy credits. And believe me, I worked on those legacy credits for 20 years. I mean, I've been there, but the day is past now. I think we are now in Z forward, and how do you make that work for everybody?
What I talk about in this is I think 45Z done well will make more of an impact on the conservation ag movement than the farm bill policies. Yeah. And it's because of the wide array of different things that it could incentivize, and it's the dollar, the carrot that's there and available, the less paperwork that you got to deal with, the less long-term contracts you have to deal with, getting rid of additionality and only rewarding laggards who have ability to change practices. So I think it can make a tremendous impact. I mentioned Continuum. We've scored over 350 million bushels of crop, and the average CI score is 11.5 is what we're seeing on the corn, 11.5 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per MMBTU. That's down from the default of 29.1, and that delta between default to the average that we're seeing would be worth about $1.02 per bushel in 45Z, and that's shareable value, not value to the farmer. That's value that goes through the ethanol plant or through the biofuel producer, and then a portion of it to the farmer. But the impact that it could make in showing farmers, hey, here the biggest levers to lower your CI score are cover crops, reducing tillage, should be reducing synthetic fertilizer, utilizing manure, utilizing improved yield, and that's what we're advocating for the GREET feedstock calculator, not the USDA one that got rid of those items for some reason. But yeah, this done well can have a huge impact. And I think, to his point, I think Congress understands that, and there's enough people that get it. We just need the Department of Treasury to pick this up off the table and make hopefully we get some encouraging advice from them sometime. The IRS public comment period's open until April 10th, so I'm sure it's not going to be until significantly after that. But any positives coming out of DC, I think, is really going to incentivize more farmer change. And really what we need to see right now is just enough awareness or enough positives coming from DC to at least enable the biofuel producers to start spending a little bit of money in their supply chain to start buying the low carbon grain. There's very little of that going on right now. We also need more transactions going and the credits being sold into the market. Very little of that going on right now. And then, of course, enough certainty for farmers to spend all the time to gather all this data. And even more importantly, as they're looking at the 2026 crop, they need to have enough clarity to be incentivized to actually change some of these practices going into this fall. So that's really the time frame for the farmer side, is going to be by August, September, when we're making decisions for 2026 crop. That's when we really need to have at least some clarity that this is going to happen farmers would be investing a lot of money there. So any clarity will really help. But I think it's here. I think it's going to stick around. But I just hope we get some momentum going forward to at least, encourage farmers to see this through. I think the rules not getting done, by December 31st like they were supposed to, obviously really deterred a lot of the momentum. Pretty discouraging, but I think it could be picked back up and be great still.
I think I agree with everything you said, Mitchell, except one thing, which I'll mention in just a second. But I do think that one of the things that makes the CSA rule so interesting is that it overlaps with farmers' own priorities, right? With things that they want to be doing on their farms to take care of their soil, to take care of that farm for the next generation, right? So it's just giving them more tools to do that. And I think like with products like Pivot Bio, with our biological nitrogen, it also meets some of the regional and state level goals in terms of nutrient reduction that we know are an issue there, right? We've got Nebraska that moved forward with some really interesting legislation last year to incentivize nutrient reduction on farms. And then we've got other states in the Midwest, Iowa, Minnesota, looking at similar measures too. So it's also a really great example of federal policy that overlaps with, I think, state and local priorities, as well as the priorities of the growers themselves. And then I think the other thing I would say is just on the FDCIC, I think we think that it's really positive that the FDCIC has gone over to USDA for management rather than being in Department of Energy. I think Department of Energy does a great job with the from the processor to the wheel, right? That there's the science and their approach on that is exactly what it should be. But we all know that the farm is pretty complicated, right? And so we do think that having the FDCIC at USDA with the subject matter experts at USDA who can bring in the right frameworks around modeling, not just the carbon and nitrogen cycles in the soil, but also the crop simulation models that are going to be needed to ensure that we have productivity alongside the conservation goals. We really do think that USDA is the best home for that. Now, should there be more practices? Absolutely. So we'd like to see that too.
Gosh, and I think that leads into another great question, which is came from the audience as well. With all of the personnel cuts that we're seeing at USDA, but also across the board at federal agencies, how might that impact the work on these clean fuel policies?
Yeah, so I think it will be marginal. I think it just depends on the priority. We haven't gotten a real clear signal yet from the administration, whether it's USDA, DOE, or Treasury, what they're going to do with the rules that are pending that require more additional guidance, that require more work. And so I think we're waiting to see where they go. I think ultimately, there's a little, like I said, the chicken and the egg. The administration's unlikely to move forward on some of these rules while Congress is actively considering legislation that might change or impact that. So I think it's kind of an easy way for them to kind of wait a little bit and see, all right, what's going to happen with legislation? Are these credits going to stay? Do we need more guidance? Is it going to change where we're going to have to update the guidance? So I think there's going to be some waiting period on that. But I think from a staffing perspective, once they decide to do this, a lot of the things that need to be done aren't a real heavy lift. And so it's just a matter of, let's see what the priorities are from them on these topics. I do think it fits really in with the energy dominance, U.S. America investments. It's just, I think we're going to wait and see until the legislation firms up a little bit more.
And you kind of mentioned we're waiting to see exact priorities, but there has been this push to maybe rebrand some of these climate initiatives under the Trump administration. We've seen the shift from sustainable aviation fuel to synthetic aviation fuel. Does that signal anything about how the administration might work on biofuels?
Well, I mean, the good news is they actually said biofuels in the executive orders, right? So they reaffirmed that we're going to say biofuels. Whether you call it synthetic aviation fuel, I mean, I understand that. I think at the end of the day, the products that everyone here represented makes all fits into the goals of the administration. And so regardless of whether you call it conservation or climate smart ag, like at the end of the day, it's conservation, it's American energy, it's It's sources of energy from the farm, from the rural economies. So I think the names are somewhat immaterial. It's how do we talk about it and what's the benefit to the consumer, to the farmer, to rural economies. And I think we've been doing that for decades. And I think that will resonate more than anything, regardless of what ultimately we end up calling it.
Gotcha. Here's another question from the audience. Kind of with the, or how do we get out of the, or ahead of the food versus fuel critics? I know that's a big topic of conversation whenever we're talking about advancing biofuels and growing biofuels. Any thoughts from the panel on that?
Yeah, I mean, it comes up all the time, right? And of course, as a lot of the groups here know, when a bushel of corn goes to an ethanol plant, on average 2.9 gallons of ethanol come out, plus a bunch of DDGs, plus corn oil, plus so many other things that are also produced. Those DDGs, of course, going to be fed back to livestock. I think there's enough room for all of it here, and we're producing food and fuel with these same bushels. That's the point, and we got to continue to educate more people about that. The biggest thing that's going to hurt the food versus fuel piece of this is going with mass balance versus book and claim. So I'll use my example. I'm in Washington County, Iowa, Southeast Iowa. We're number 2 pork producing county in the country. Via book and claim, which is the previous administration's recommendation for 45Z, was to do book and claim, which means that the corn has to go, the low carbon corn has to go to the biofuel producer, whether that be via the elevator or direct. So for my farm, now I can no longer, if I want to monetize my low carbon grain, I have to sell my corn to the ethanol plant, which is 46 miles away. It costs me 26 cents in shipping to get it there, versus I want to take it right to the hog producer because I've got a pile of them right around me in Washington County. And it would only cost me 12 cents to ship it to them, but they can't monetize this credit at all, and I would be financially incentivized to go away from my local hog producer and sell to the ethanol plant. The money would be money ahead for me, but it would jack up local cost to that livestock producer, and they're already in a lot of really tight margins. Versus we could utilize the GREET model, GREET feedstock calculator that incentivizes manure, incentivizes organic fertilizer inputs, and use a book and claim so that even those, I could now collaborate with my local hog producer, sell them the corn, and we can go monetize the CI certificates in the open market, win-win for all of us. And then that also sets a precedent that'd be a lot easier to decarbonize the livestock industry as well, because they could also work towards buying these certificates. I believe that's where this will go, is basically replacing kind of what we've seen in the carbon markets. And instead of doing carbon markets where it's based on tons of carbon, do carbon markets that are more around insetting and CI certificates, carbon intensity, where the asset is representative of one bushel and the carbon intensity of that singular bushel. And then those certificates could be traded on the markets. And I think opens up a tremendous opportunity to incentivize fuel and food, but overall strengthen and revitalize real communities in American ag.
Yeah, there's no topic that frustrates me more than indirect land use change than food versus fuel. I mean, look at where we are today. We are producing more fuel than we ever have. The renewable diesel expansion happened. What happened when the policy signals were sent? The market responded. Crush plants got built all over the United States. We're awash in soybean meal. We're awash in vegetable oil. We're awash in all types of nutrition for animals and people across the board, all while these new markets have come to bear. Whether it's RD, whether it's hydrogen, whether it's SAF, all these things are happening, and yet commodity prices are as low as they are, and we have abundance of supply, right? The best thing that ever happened to the advent of growing crops and technology was the renewable fuel standard. It required the technology companies to deploy. We're growing more on fewer acres than we did before the RFS passed in 2005. Why? The market sent a signal to innovate, to tell people how to do more with less. And these policies have the exact same opportunity, whether it's Z, on technology on the farms, the hydrogen credit. You have the ability to be more efficient on farms with capturing waste. So these are all policies that are win-win across the board, and it is not a choice between one or the other. It is a total false solution or false option. Sorry.
Um, and one thing that we haven't really touched on yet, but I know was a really big conversation ahead of this guidance coming out on 45Z, was foreign feedstocks, specifically for the kind of oilseed industry. This was a big issue. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how 45Z handled that issue and, if Treasury is likely to do more or kind of continue that momentum.
Yeah, so Treasury addressed this when they put out the rules in January, where they only allowed a certain number of pathways to qualify under 45Z, and it effectively only allowed for U.S. feedstocks, save for canola, and then tallow from anywhere in the world. But UCO is only allowed if it's made in the United States. So I don't expect that policy to change from a regulatory perspective. I don't see a Biden or a Trump administration saying, yeah, we're going to open up pathways for Chinese UCO. The question is, all right, are they going to do something legislatively to maybe make it more of a firm thing? That's certainly possible. I think it's difficult, again, with the vote margins and the difference in stakeholders that are across the spectrum. But I think from a regulatory perspective, I don't see a lot of change happening there. But I do think there's going to be an effort under 45Z to, all right, how do you better incentivize the use of domestic fuel and feedstocks? And so that gets back to the scoring, it gets back to climate smart ag, things that narrow the gap or change the way the carbon intensity scoring is, which leads directly to the value of the credit. I think folks are very interested in how do they address that question. So rather than banning, et cetera, how do you level the playing field where there's a huge advantage for waste feedstocks versus domestic crops and particularly foreign imports? And I think there's a great deal of interest across the Republican conference to address that issue. How it happens, I think, remains to be seen, but I think they definitely are looking at that.
Gotcha. And kind of just to close up here, I know ahead of the guidance coming out, there's a lot of talk about the uncertainty, the delays in getting official guidance and final guidance has caused already. And, wondering if you all can each talk about the kind of need for quick action on this and the most likely pathway to that.
Yeah, I kind of spoke to it before. I'm hoping that we'll get a little bit of some insights from this Department of Treasury, maybe around the summer, right? So USDA public comment period closes tomorrow. IRS public comment period closes on April 10th. Hopefully this summer, be able to get some movement, maybe some initial guidance in, maybe some preliminary guidance issued. I assume we'll have another public comment period as we go into the fall, provide them some comments and feedback and let them finalize some rules. I don't think it would happen by the end of the year. I would assume early after the first of the year, but at least some movement would still get us what we need to encourage farmers. We've been very proactive in this. We actually have been working with a group out of Des Moines called Eco Engineers, who is our third-party auditor. We developed a MRV protocol to measure, report, and verify on-farm carbon intensity scores using the ISO 14064 and 14065 protocols, which is named in some of the guidance. We passed the first ever audit in this space, proving that we can verify these on-farm carbon intensity scores at the farmer level. And we did it with 29 million bushels in audit number 1. So we can do it at scale, passing these very rigorous audits, doing it inexpensively for the farmers. This is absolutely ready to scale, but I hope by this summer there's a little bit some momentum. I don't think it would have to be 100% locked in and finalized. I don't think that's going to happen for a while, but any encouragement is great. And that's, of course, our message to even our Congress folks as well, is just continue to encourage that 45Z is a big deal and these other credits as well. Just any positives on that is great for the farmers who are facing tremendous uncertainty, a lot of unknowns, a lot of, obviously farmers are still optimistic in the Trump administration, but in the short term, it's like, gosh, it's a little tight. So any encouragement from 45Z is just huge, just for the morale of row crop farmers in the Midwest.
Yeah, I think we'd love to see something like that. We're moving forward without counting on any of it, really trying to sell the story to potential tax credit buyers, and we may have to do certain things in those transactions to make them happen. But I think getting that to happen starts to also make it real. When we put a transaction on the board, then I think incrementally it gets harder to sort of backtrack as we work on making sure that the scoring is right. Right now we're getting just massively discount on the actual impact that we create with our farmers. And so getting the right score would be massive for the Z. And then, we need to be able to count the actual feedstocks that a hydrogen producer uses, make sure we've got book and claim for delivering our product. Natural gas is even more fungible than corn, right? We put it into a pipeline system and it instantly actually mixes with everything. So other delivery methods would be irrational. So optimistic, hopeful, maybe, but trying to move forward with what we've got to try to make it more solid and start realizing some value from what's already there.
I would just, agree that, we also feel optimistic about this and, want to see, as we all know, it's a tough farm economy right now. So I think anything we can do to signal, additional revenue opportunities for growers is really positive. And the other piece from an innovator's point of view too is, this is a strong signal to American innovators that, there's a pathway forward and there's encouragement from the administration to keep innovating and to keep bringing these tools forward for growers to do what they do best.
Awesome. Yeah, that was a fantastic discussion. Thank you all again so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, so please remain seated while we take a moment to recognize BASF for supporting today's summit.
Why on earth would anyone want this job? Because the love runs deep. Through the grind, the unknowns, the challenges at every turn, farmers are here for all of it, and so are we. One-upping ourselves every day to support them from all angles. We walk the fields to understand what they're facing and what they'll face next. We work with our partners to develop and deliver unmatched, customized solutions, bred for each farmer's unique conditions. And we invest in the future, innovating technologies they don't yet know they need. Their passion and perseverance drive us. Their struggles inspire us. We share in the hardships and celebrate the wins. So why on earth do we do it? For the love of farming, the biggest job on earth.